right? But I'm trying to find out. So if you were to simplify to the audience wants to know, hey, Stephen, what are some of those 6,000 patents that we have, and what industries would they destroy, and how much would our lives improve? For example, one, we have access to being able to produce cars that can run on water, and it puts $5 trillion oil industry out of business overnight.
Right.
We have the pharmaceutical side to be able to come up and solve cancer tonight. We just have, because if we do the amount of chemotherapy business is a such and such amount of billion-dollar industry, we don't want to put that out of this. We have the ability to do it. I want to know, do you know what technologies and patents are in there?
I do.
Can you share some of them with the public that maybe would be revealing?
Well, I can do better than that. You go to our archive, and there's a whole file of, I believe, thousands of pages of those that were copied by a man I knew who's passed away named John Bedini. And there was a CIA officer who had approached me, but previously had approached him and took him. And it's called the Secrecy files, Seceki, Secrecy. And he was a CIA officer who allowed Mr. Bedini to go into a...
Bedini or Benini?
Bedini, Bedini.
Got it.
John Bedini. And he's passed away, but a couple years ago. But this CIA officer, Secrecy, he let him go into a facility where they had confiscated these sort of inventions over many decades. And they had the patents in file cabinets. And he told John Bedini, he said, he was trying to recruit him into the agency in a covert program dealing with technologies, because the guy was a genius with electromagnetic engineering. Bedini was, and he let him for 24 hours copy anything he wanted. And so he went in, he did. But the CIA officer, Secrecy, eventually was told, no, I'm not going to join your operation. But Bedini had kept a copy of those files, which members of my team digitized.
So the CIA officer didn't know that he took those files.
He didn't know he kept a copy. He thought he got them all back. And now we've released them.
Woo! Hey, this gonna be a good one today. I am your host, Dave, an almost 10-year intellectual property attorney dealing with everything from trademarks to copyrights to trade secrets, and yep, you guessed it, patents. Now, PBD has kind of been going down a rabbit hole lately regarding this Invention Secrecy Act and what type of technologies and patents the government has been essentially taking from people and shelving them or doing whatever, not releasing them to the public. He had this gentleman, Steve Greer, Dr. Steve Greer, on his podcast here recently. And to be honest with you, this Dr. Steve Greer, this gentleman, and he's a heavy hitter. He's a big dog. And we're going to get off into a lot what he talked about with some of these patents. And we're going to look into the DPI archive that he kind of talked about, where he has a lot of the paperwork. We're going to look at some stuff that that's in that archive and kind of read through some of those documents and see if the stuff matches up what he's saying here on PBD. Again, he's talking a lot about energy, whether it's electromagnetic energy. He's talking about water and kind of water proportion systems, such that, hey, we don't have to pay gas and things like that. I think he talked also about, which we get off into later, where, hey, with the Teslas, Elon Musk, that was cute what he did with the Tesla, with the electric vehicle. However, this gentleman, Floyd Sweet, he had this device that allowed you didn't have to plug up the car, and it ran forever with pretty much a device that was just bigger than a cigarette box. So we'll look at all those documents in the archive. Again, this Dr. Steve Greer, he's a heavy hitter, man. Just kind of going back and kind of doing some research on him and what he's about, and just kind of what he's done with the archive. Kudos to him, taking all these documents, digitizing them, and kind of putting them out there to the archive. I know a lot of times is this stuff real? Is the government really taking people's stuff? Are aliens really real? UFOs really real? I know he talked a lot about a lot of that stuff, which I'm not going to get off into. I'm going to stay with my specialty here is patents. We're going to look at this secrecy order. I'm going to allow you to look at the MPEP, which is essentially like the patent law Bible, as what us patent attorneys always refer to. We're going to see what the secrecy order what types of secrecy order? A lot of people, they just think of the Invention Secrecy Act, which we'll also take a look at that during this video, but they just think that, okay, you have the Invention Secrecy Act and that's it. Well, you got the secrecy orders, and it kind of breaks down secret order 1, order 2, order 3. How do you decide whether or not your invention falls in order 1, order 2, or order 3? We're going to look at all that today and more. So again, but before we actually look at this archive that he's talking about, I want to play 2 more other segments from this video that I think is cool. In the first segment, as I come back on myself, it's dealing with Nikola Tesla. And as a patent attorney, and it's 2024. Nikola Tesla, Rome, early 1900s. And you would be amazed that even to this day, just listen to me. This is how far Nikola Tesla, or ahead of his time, Nikola Tesla was, where it's still patent applications that, again, typically when you have a patent application, the examiner is going to pick it up and he's going to try to find other patent applications or publications or patents or other materials out there that he can reject your application because he's saying, hey, this is not new. This is already taught in this reference, this patent application, this publication. And a lot of those publications that I come across or that patent site against that I see cited is Nikola Tesla patents, which is, again, goes to show you that 100 years ahead of his time, now these type of inventions are being cited by examiners at the USPTO, which is amazing that that gentleman had that type of wherewithal, that forethought, that he was that much ahead of his time, where he was working on stuff that would be relevant still in society hundreds of years later, or at least 100 years later. And that's still, be important things that talked about, things that maybe be kept from the government. Again, this guy is going to talk about it all here. So again, this Nikola Tesla gentleman, if you guys don't know, he's a pretty heavy hitter. It's unfortunately that he died broke, but let's scrub through this video and pull up where he's talking about Nikola Tesla and play that. So let's go.
And what people don't, a lot of people don't think that kind of thing happens. And of course, the media said it was an accident. His son, unfortunately, thinks he committed suicide, which he didn't. And that's a terrible thing. That think your father committed suicide. He did not commit suicide.
What's the story of what happened with Nikola Tesla when he got out in a cab and, that whole story?
So again, just kind of, I know we skipped through the video, just kind of bring you guys up to speed. It seems like Nikola Tesla, we all know he died a broke man. You guys have to watch The Man Who Built America, where obviously Tesla, Edison were like running mates. And obviously we all know that Nikola Tesla invented the AC current. Thomas Edison had the DC current. And what we all use today is the AC current, which again goes to show you that, again, the gentleman Nikola Tesla was ahead of his time. However, kind of later down the line, dealing with the AC current, he kind of gave that, he had a royalty on that, where he was dealing with Westinghouse, and to try to kind of keep that business going, he ripped up the patent so that Westinghouse and the partners of that business didn't have to give him a royalty, which was a big mistake. And like I said, ultimately Nikola Tesla died broke. And what PBD is going to get off into at this point, which I'm going to play, is he's talking about, hey man, I heard that Nikola Tesla, he died by somebody running him over with a car, and I heard there was some foul play involved with that. He's trying to get Dr. Steve Greer to kind of comment on that. And so that's kind of where we are at this point in the video. So let's go play this and see what Dr. Steve Greer has to say about Tesla.
Yeah, well, he knew too much too. When Albert Einstein was asked by a reporter, what's it like being a genius? You know what he said? I wouldn't know, ask Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was probably the great genius of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
And he died a poor man, a bitter man. Most of his huge breakthroughs never saw the light of day.
Right. And again, he's talking about, and I have to stop this video, he's talking about some of his huge breakthroughs never saw the light of day. But let's not let Nikola Tesla off the hook. The AC current, which we are using today, that did see the light of day, and he ripped up the document, the only document that was going to protect him from a financial standpoint, and that being his patent that he ripped up. Again, go watch The Man Who Built America and the story of him and Westinghouse, and again, they're essentially were going bankrupt, and Nikola Tesla, to save the company, ripped up his patent so that essentially they didn't have to pay him a royalty. So, and I understand Dr. Steve Greer talking about a lot of his patents, a lot of his work did not see the light of day, but he did have some work, some products, some things like that did see the light of day that he just didn't capitalize off from a financial standpoint. So let's again, as great as Nikola Tesla was, let's not let him totally off the hook. Let's continue to see what Dr. Steve Greer has to say, though.
He had one of these sort of electromagnetic generators that was free energy. JP Morgan famously told him, if we can't put a meter on it and charge,
Got to make that money.
Is not coming out. I mean, we're talking 20s here, 100 years ago. So, it didn't help that he was a genius and had these breakthroughs. And that's why it's like 24 trunks of secret papers. And the day he died, we can prove this. In this archive is a Department of Defense memo to the FBI demanding that the FBI turn those over. And I don't know if they ever did. I mean, that happened in 43. The document is not contested. It's authenticated document was from the 1980s. So eventually someone at the Pentagon realized what the FBI was sitting on in a compartmented black project, and they wanted it. So, the untangling the history of this, Chris.
So I'm gonna kind of leave that as there. Hey, we all know the FBI, the CIA, those three-letter agencies, man. They can be kind of up to no good, unfortunately, a lot of times. But now I want to kind of switch gears here and go to this gentleman named Floyd Sweet. So again, Dr. Steve Greer, he's going to explain who Floyd Sweet is, the importance of his inventions, his product. But then we're going to also go read some documents from others in the archive that Dr. Steve Greer talks about, and kind of read how much of the man, how ahead of his time this guy Floyd Sweet was. So let me scrub through the video here one more time. And then, like I said, we'll check out some more, or the archive definitely, but then we'll also check out, let's see here. Okay, here we go right here. Here we go. Let's go.
My full-time job is being a dad because I make over $300,000 annually without doing.
Rely on people and their credibility and what documentation they can prove. And I think what's most important, the reason I'm releasing this archive, is that if you go through it carefully, you see where the dots all connect. But these intelligence briefings we're working on, the modules, we call these intelligence modules, when those get put in, it's going to connect all these dots. And that's a big undertaking that we're working on right now.
Jamie Dimon, where do you put him? Is Jamie Dimon a person all the way at the top, or not really?
I wouldn't know. I don't know anything about him.
You don't know anything about
I have
Jamie
no
Dimon.
information on
Elon, what do you think about Elon Musk, and what role is he? Like a Nikola Tesla? Is he a good guy in your eyes? Is he somebody that the establishment can't stand? Is he someone they can't control?
Well, I think that certainly if he was inclined to research this end of it, he wouldn't be making I call it a fake Tesla. I mean, a real Tesla car wouldn't have to be plugged in. It most certainly wouldn't have 900 and some pounds of lithium ion batteries. It would be an electromagnetic generator. If you look at this archive, we have this whole account of this inventor named Floyd Sweet. He had something the size a little bit bigger than a cigarette pack. And this was back in the 80s. And we have all the documentation on this. Huge files on it. And it was running a 300 horsepower motor that could run your car. And it never had to be plugged in. I think the battery started up with some very tiny battery, And once that circuit started, it was pulling energy.
So what do you guys think about that? So he's saying, hey, what Elon Musk doing? Hey, that's cool, but he got this heavy battery, and like as a patent attorney and worked a lot with the electric vehicles, that the weight of the battery is kind of a big maybe issue that they have to kind of design around as it relates to the electric vehicle. He's saying, hey, this guy Floyd Sweet, which we'll take a look at some of his documents here, where this gentleman Floyd Sweet, he has this thing that was, hey, just bigger than a cigarette box, produced 300 horsepower, same as 300 horsepower from a gas engine, that much power, which is crazy. Never had to be plugged up. Renewable energy or clean energy. This stuff was that's pretty impressive to say the least. So I do want to kind of at least share my screen really quickly and talk about the inventions. That this is the Invention Secrecy Act here, as I'm kind of pulling it up here. And just to kind of give you guys a background of where we're going, this is a body of law in the U.S. federal law designed to prevent the disclosure, hopefully you guys can see my screen, of new inventions and technologies that in the opinion of selected federal agencies. And again, a big word here is opinion. Again, my opinion can be different from his opinion. That can be different from your opinion. So this whole subjective, okay, whose opinion matters, present an alleged threat to economic stability or national security of the U.S. So based on somebody's opinion, if this a technology or invention presents an alleged threat to economic stability or national security of the U.S., hey, it falls within the Invention Secrecy Act, and therefore the government can kind of more or less control the disclosure, the production, the dissemination of that actual technology. And again, what is economic stability? I know PBD was talking about it a little bit on his show of, okay, you have an oil company, you have an oil industry, hey, having this kind of battery that runs on pretty much nothing, or whether it's a water engine that runs on water, which essentially means that it's running free, that can disrupt the oil industry. If you have this battery that is small and it gives you a ton of miles, then that can disrupt again the gas industry, the car industry. So as the U.S. government, we're going to withhold the dissemination, the distribution, the disclosure of those technology. What about national security? And obviously the national security, I see a lot more as far as the patent industry goes. And again, if you have a bomb or some kind of military defense technology that you're working on, yeah, they're going to kind of prevent you from being able to disclose that, at least to certain countries. So we're going to take a look at that here really quickly. But again, one of the things we're going to look at the NPEP. Now, again, the NPEP for all my Christians, all my religious folks, is like the Bible for patent attorneys, similar to the Holy Bible is to Christians, and the Quran is to, I forget what group uses the Quran. But again, this NPEP is the Bible for patent attorneys. So we're going to see what the NPEP says about these secret orders, this Invention Secrecy Act. And again, I want you guys to kind of let me know if you guys agree with this or not. Do you think it, this makes sense and it's kind of to save the greater good, or maybe no? So let's take a look at this really quickly. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm gonna try to blow my screen up here bigger so that you guys can see this stuff. But we're going to start with the secrecy order. So again, this secrecy order is similar to what we were talking about with this Invention Secrecy Act, or in other words, stems from the Invention Secrecy Act. So let's go to 337 CFR 5.2, the secrecy order here. Paragraph A, when notified by the chief officer of a defense agency that publication or disclosure of the invention by the granting of a patent would be detrimental to the national security, in order that the invention be kept secret, will be issued. So what does this mean? This means that you can file for a patent application, and the USPTO is in works with the federal government, the defense, the DOD, the FBI, these different branches of the federal government, where if somebody at the USPTO picks up this thing, the application, and says, okay, I think this deals with national security or some other thing where we need to have another 3-letter department review it and see whether or not it should be kept secret. Again, to the extent that it is deemed to have to be kept secret, somebody from those defense agencies, this is what it says, somebody, a chief officer of that defense agency, essentially will contact the patent owner or the patent application owner and say, hey, we got to keep this thing secret. Let's go to part B here, or paragraph B. Any requests for compensation that provided in 35 USC 183. So it seems like it may be an unjust, a taking, eminent domain, that type of a thing, and therefore you may be able to get money from it. But again, part B talks about that says any request for compensation. So if you say, hey man, y'all can't just take my stuff like that, I want some money, they're saying that it must not be made to the patent office, but directly to the department or agency. So in other words, the patent office is not going to give you any money for somebody trying to the government taking your invention or your technology. You have to go to the actual agency who said that they're going to keep it secret, and because it kind of falls under that secrecy order, to try to get any money that you may be deemed eligible for. But the U.S. Patent Office, don't call the USPTO talking about y'all kept my invention secret, I need some money. Because what this paragraph is saying is they're not the department the kind of care for that. So let's scroll down a little bit more. Again, this talks about, hey, you can actually try to petition for rescission of the secrecy order. I can tell you maybe that's not going to work as well as you think, but I guess you can try. It doesn't hurt to try. Here we go here. The secrecy order type. So everybody thinks that everything is kind of every invention, every technology that is being held secret is being held secret under the same thing. And it's actually 3 types of secrecy orders, each of a different scope, as it said here. So we have the part A here is the secrecy order. This is the type 1 secrecy order. And this is the secrecy order and permit for foreign filing in certain countries. So this is saying, hey, the U.S. government is saying, hey, this is secret information. However, we're still going to permit you to file it abroad. In certain countries, though, we're not going to let you file it abroad everywhere, but we are going to let you file it abroad in certain countries. So let's go back to it. Let's see what type of technology or invention will fall under the type 1 secrecy order. It's essentially to be used for those patent applications that disclose critical technology with military or space application in accordance with the DoD directive. So again, if you have a technology that's dealing with military or space applications, shout out to Elon Musk, and you're trying to disclose this thing, in a patent application, they may allow you to file in certain countries, but again, that type of invention is going to fall under what we call a type 1 secrecy order. Let's go back to it. We have type 2 secrecy order. And again, secrecy order and permit for disclosing classified information. So this seems like it's dealing with classified information. And again, this says to be used for those patent applications which contain data that is properly classified or classifiable under a security guideline where the patent application owner has current DoD, Department of Defense security agreement, has a current DoD security agreement. So in other words, if you're trying to include classified information in your patent application, you just so happen to be a patent owner who has a current DoD, Department of Defense security agreement, this is going to be considered type 2 secrecy order. Now, you still may be able to disclose the contents, but it's going to fall in the type 2 secrecy order. And then later on, which we'll read, it talks about you will have to have on that actual patent application, this is classified information. So let's go to the third and most important type of secrecy order, the general secrecy order. And this is actually the catch-all. Everything that Dr. Steve Gritt talked about on the PBD podcast, I would imagine that this is going to fall under type 3 secrecy order, the general secrecy order, to be used for those patent applications that contain data deemed detrimental to national security if published or disclosed, including that data properly classifiable under a security guideline where the patent application owner does not have a DoD security agreement. So you don't have a Department of Defense agreement or a security agreement with the Department of Defense. It may be classifiable, maybe classified information, but it contains data that's detrimental to the national security if it's published. The order prevents disclosure of the subject matter to anyone without an express written consent from the Commissioner of Patents. Which again, we talked about how type 1 military space applications, you can file those in foreign in certain countries. Type 2 is classified information, but you still maybe can file those, or you have to have that kind of confidential stamp kind of marked on it, so everybody who's reviewing that material knows that it's confidential information or classified information. Then you have this type 3 secrecy order, which they're saying, hey, the order prevents the disclosure of the subject matter. So, hey, unless you have an express written consent from the Commissioner of the Patents, you cannot disclose this information. So this is the most strict secrecy order type is a type 3 secrecy order. So let's kind of go through here. Type 1 secrecy order. Let me kind of share my screen again. So this type 1 secrecy order, it kind of summarizes things. Type 1 secrecy order, looking at this paragraph here, is intended to permit the widest utilization of the technical data in the patent application while still controlling any publication or disclosure which would result in unlawful exportation. This type of secrecy order, again, identifies the countries where corresponding patent applications may be filed. So they talked about, hey, you can file these things foreignly, but you have to file them in certain countries. And essentially the countries with which the U.S. has reciprocal security agreements, and they list the countries right here. Let's go to type 2. The intent of type 2 secrecy order is to treat classified and classifiable technical data presented as a patent application in the same manner as other classified materials. So typically, if you have classified material, you have that notification on that classified material saying that this is classified information. you have to include that same kind of stamp, if you will, on the patent application to the extent that you're trying to file an application that has under this type 2 secrecy order. Then going here, the last one, type 3 secrecy order is issued where the other types of orders do not apply. This is essentially is a catch-all. So that's pretty much it. Then this last paragraph here talks about a secrecy order should not be construed in any way to mean that the government has adopted or contemplates the adoption of the alleged invention disclosed in any application, nor is it any indication of the value of such invention. So pretty much they're saying, hey, just because we took your stuff, that doesn't mean that we're going to give you money for it or kind of saying anything about the value of your of that patent application, of that invention, of that technology, or that doesn't mean that we, the federal government, the U.S. government, is actually going to use or apply your invention. We just pretty much essentially taking your stuff. You cannot use it. So hopefully you guys got something out of that. I did want to, and this is actually pretty interesting. I think this is really interesting. Going to the archives that Dr. Steve Greer talked about, we're going to take a look at one account of some gentlemen who saw Floyd Sweet guy that Dr. Steve Greer talked about, and his invention on his device that allows you to essentially hook up this device to an automobile, for example, and have electrical energy, the equivalent of 300 horsepower, and essentially do that with a very small device, and being able to do that with clean energy. So I'm gonna kind of read the important parts of this thing, but hopefully you guys can see it. Let me blow it up a little bit more. Hopefully you guys can see it. That's too big. I can't even see it. This is observation of so this gentleman, Maurice Campbell, which you see here, he's talking about observation of Floyd Sweet device by Maurice Campbell. They redacted some of the names. So obviously it seems like some of the names is going to be Floyd Sweet. But again, this is observation of Maurice Campbell and his two brothers based on the time spent with, I'm assuming that redacted name is Floyd Sweet regarding his free energy device, given a title here. So in about 1988, this is Maurice Campbell talking about it. And I'm not going to read through all the document. I'm going to kind of skip to the important parts here. In about 1988, a gentleman who my brothers and I were involved with in the high-tech field realized that my brother, who was a doctor, was interested in a negative energy device for the treatment of physical body. His name was John. And again, goes back to the gentleman that not Floyd Sweet, but Dr. Steve Greer talked about in that opening paragraph, where he was like, hey, this gentleman, John, who was a genius on electromagnetic energy and things like that. It seems like that, again, that name John is coming up again, or that same individual, John, is coming up again based on Maurice Campbell accounts of the events. So it says here, was interested in negative energy. His brother essentially was interested in negative energy. His name was John, and he had formerly been employed by NASA and kind of lived in California close to Sparky. And that is where my story begins. So let's kind of skip the page here because the rest of that stuff is not necessarily that important, at least for my purpose. Again, so here we go. So the energy device was mainly three things. It was a healing device. We're not going to get off into that. Seems like that maybe why his brother wanted to use it. It was an energy device that Maurice is saying is probably the world's worst weapon. I'm assuming that this redacted name is Floyd here. He's talking about Floyd claimed that, like Nikola Tesla, it's crazy that Nikola Tesla name is coming up here, you could cause artificial earthquakes, which is crazy, besides destroying buildings. As I understand from people in the intelligence world, this is Maurice Campbell talking again, which we debriefed after we saw the device operate. 3 countries have what is called the Tesla cannon: Russia, America, and he said he's talking about he never found out who was that third country. As mentioned earlier, this energy source is what disabled Floyd's Sweet BTA equipment over the many months until he got a buffer built into his device. So it seems like maybe America was using this energy choice to continue to disable Floyd's Sweet BTA device over the months that they were dealing with it. Further, this is why the federal government has such interest in what we were doing with Sparky. I'm assuming Sparky is Floyd's Sweet, but I'm not sure, over the time period we spent with him. This device, and then so that's the second part. The VTA device was, I guess, the world's worst weapon. But then part 3, the device was an energy source for the home, the car, and many other purposes. This cost to build one energy device was about $200, which was incredible, he's saying. And I would say if you're building a battery, even back in the 1980s for $200, that's some pretty legit stuff. So let's skip here. On that blessed day, Maurice Campbell was talking about when we arrived, him and his brothers, and witnessed this VTA device in operation. He said it is a day that he should never forget. To actually see a device that only would cost approximately $200 and create all the clean energy you would ever need was awesome. I know I have been altered ever since knowing that such a device existed. Now for a brief description of the device, which is crazy. He's talking about like he just met a I'm not going to get off into that. But let's move along here. We're going to get off into some important parts of it. So here we go. He's talking about the rest of the story. You are probably wondering what the article. So I guess it seems like he's attaching to whoever he's sending this, writing this document to. He's attaching his magnet motor article on Brent is about. I have allowed his full name because he is already out in the public domain in the Tesla magazine. Again, Tesla had his own magazine. This is crazy. So I thought, what the heck? It's a long story, but after I move in his laboratory all the way from the mouth of Zion's National Park to someplace, Oregon, to hide him out, I'm assuming he's talking about Floyd's suite, he was using the tacky on beams with his medical equipment, and after only a couple of minutes, the black helicopters would show up. So this DBR, I'm assuming at his brother's request, I moved Ron to Oregon. At the time, I thought Blank was a real flake because when I helped him forward his mail from a small town in Utah, he asked me how to spell the word electric so he could put it in a full address, Brent Electric. So it seems like this Ron guy didn't have a clue how to spell electric and maybe was at least not the brightest guy. Further said he was only here on Earth. So I guess this guy, Ron, is talking to him, which is kind of crazy. He's talking about he's on Earth only until 2012. And it was 87 or 88 at the time. Then he had to leave to go to another planet. I now wanted to shoot my brother who got me into this whole move thing. My brother told me that he had to, Blank had to move fast because Blank had told him that an earthquake was coming in the next few days. Right. Well, guess what happened a few days later? Maurice Campbell says that the largest earthquake in many years in that particular location took place, and it even wiped out the hot springs at the resort along the Virgin River that runs through Zion's National Park and through the small town of Virgin where Ron lived. I since found out that Ron had invented the earthquake equipment along with this other guy, Blank, grandson, and they had actually predicted the last great earthquake in California, and we're only about 6 minutes. We're only off about 6 minutes. The government is insisted that they want the equipment so that one of the reasons for, I guess essentially they're trying to hide out this gentleman Ron from the government, it seems like. So now Maurice is talking about, now, why am I giving you all this preliminary information regarding Blank? Well, it seems that Blank has the magnetic motor. Again, this is the magnetic motor device that Dr. Steve Greer is talking about that is just bigger than a cigarette pack and you can be hooked up to your car and essentially provide 300 horsepower of energy to your car, which is crazy. It only weighs 75 pounds, that Maurice Campbell was saying, based on him actually seeing it. And again, he's talking about what Dr. Steve Greer is talking about is an authenticated document where Maurice Campbell seen a device that was essentially created by Floyd Sweet. And again, Maurice Campbell was talking about it was 75 pounds and can generate the equivalent power of 300 horsepower gas engine, which is crazy. Also, the motor can be a retrofit in all cars without designing a whole new car, which is pretty helpful, I would say. This is the connection I will explain later regarding Ron, who can even spell electric. So it seemed like maybe it was some kind of disagreement between Ron and maybe Maurice Campbell and not Maurice Campbell, but Ron and Floyd Sweet. And Maurice Campbell is saying, hey, Ron couldn't even spell electric. Meanwhile, according to his dean, who, of the school, placed third of his class at MIT, Floyd Sweet, all I can say is wow. So it seemed like Floyd Sweet placed third in his class at MIT. Meanwhile, Ron can even spell electric. So this, I guess, the events surrounding the death, which I'm not going to get off into that. But again, kudos to Steve Greer, man. It seemed like he got some heavy stuff in his archive there that I wanted to bring to you guys. Now I'll get you guys out of here on this one last tidbit from the interview between PBD and Steve Greer. Let me scrub through it really quickly. And this is talking about open source. And I'm gonna give you my take on as a patent attorney to say, hey, why it's not as simple as Dr. Steve Greer is making it out to be. But I understood his point. So let's see what he's talking about, and let's wrap this thing up. Let's go. Oh, why did it?
We have all the
There
documents.
we go.
How long does it take you to dial in your
come
voltage?
on.
If you're using Xbox, probably just a few seconds. Check this out.
Documentation on this, huge files on it, and it was
There we go.
Hello, thank you for calling Gigo. Come on, man.
Uh-oh,
You keep
uh-oh,
watch
it's not
where you're
gonna-
throwing
it's not
those
gonna-
things.
Ideas
There
and
we go.
beliefs, or what do you
It sounds terrible. It's in the. I just we're doing. We're
Scrub through it a
appreciate
little
that.
bit more.
up the lost century,
Let's go.
right? And at the end, you said you wanted to build a facility that's going to be open source 24/7. You're working on stuff, and there's cameras for other people to see on whatever you're building, right? This whole concept of open source
Right.
probably became more mainstream when Elon started talking about all our stuff is open source. Open source is a phrase that's been around for a long time, but he just kind of took it to a whole different level with, a few 100 million followers. I'm like, oh, what is open source? Let me look into this. So walk me through why, your idea of open source and how that would protect both everyone, why that's a good idea. Is it going to get others to look and see, well, what if we can do it better? And what if we can do it better? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, see, that's the beauty of like crowdsourcing information. So let's say you're working on a system and you get stuck because you're having a problem rectifying the electromagnetic frequencies or whatever. If it's open source and it's streamed, you have scientists all over the world. There would be a specialist in there that could pipe in and say, well, try this, right? So you collapse timeframes. Secondly, and this is more important.
And I do agree with him, at least with that first point where, hey, if you have some type of system or invention that you're working on out in the public, and you have, I guess, the world's brightest mind being able to tap in and kind of provide advice or suggestions, that would kind of speed up the, I guess, the R&D process, if you will. I do agree with that point, but let's see what he's talking about with this second and most important point.
Important. If you do it secretively, the minute you get that eureka moment, the door is going to get kicked in, the device is going to get confiscated, and you're going to get a national security order on it, or you may get killed. Whereas if it's being streamed,
Very true.
and the old saying, the whole world's watching, that can't happen. And the other is that it can't be black shelved. If a corporation does it, I know people who become very wealthy.
I first disagree with him on you can't get killed, because just because you made it something that's been streamed live, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't get killed. That just means that it's going to be a little bit more difficult, or the government has to be a little bit more discreet if they're trying to kind of take you off in that way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't get to you. So I guess that's kind of a point to the side, but I did want to kind of get my tidbit on that. Let's go.
By having an invention like that. And they say, well, hey, what's your price? Here's $50 million. Go buy a Lamborghini. And,
They sold this.
and they sold, and that corporation puts it on a black shelf.
Right.
And it never seen. Or the patent office. In our archive, you'll see an interview.
Shell did it, right? Shell bought one of the guys for $25 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Happens all the time.
Right.
I've been.
And I would, again, even give them that to the extent that you come up with this invention, the government kind of takes it away, or they're saying, hey, or a company say, hey, we're going to give you $25 million, $50 million for the invention, for the rights to the invention. Go buy your Lamborghini or kind of live this luxury lifestyle, and we're just going to shelve this thing. He's saying that that'll prevent that. I mean, I agree that definitely may prevent that. I definitely agree with that part of it. So far, well.
Since 1991, I've been dealing with inventors that keep having that happen. The other is that if you go the patent route, there is a provision in the patent laws related to this Secrecy Act you talked about.
We just
If
read.
you look at the interview we had with Dr. Paul Vallone, who is a physicist who was in the patent office, he blew the whistle that they were doing this. And that we have that interview with him. He ended up suing the patent office because he was terminated and fired and won a settlement. So he won't talk about it now.
You said Vallone, Paul Vallone?
Yeah.
How do you spell Vallone?
Vallone.
Got it.
Dr. Paul Vallone.
Yeah.
He's a PhD physicist. So, we have all that information. So what I've tried to do is say, over the last 100 years, how has this gone sideways when people have got these discoveries? And so the idea of doing this live on the internet, streamed, backed up, multi-centered, but also where there's no intellectual property or patent attached to it. It's basically you're squeezing the toothpaste out of the tube so fast no one can put it back in. And that I don't think.
I disagree with that. And again, as a patent attorney, again, it's some countries that once you disclose the invention, disclose the technology publicly, then that means that you can no longer file for a patent. China is one of those countries. You have a lot of countries in Europe that have that same rule. But in the US, just because you have a public disclosure, you still have a year grace period to file the application. So to the extent that somebody kind of discloses this kind of invention publicly or live on a stream, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't go forth and file an invention. Number one, you can still go file for a patent, and filing for that patent, everybody who helped you, so everybody who called in and helped you, that you kind of implemented what they did, they need to also be listed as an inventor on that patent. That's just the rule. That's just because you do it live doesn't necessarily mean you can't get a patent on it. That just means that I guess it's live at that point, and everybody else will kind of, I guess, know how to do it from that standpoint. But that doesn't mean that, number one, you can't get a patent. Then number two, it also means that you can't, how should I say this? You can still monetize off of it. And I think he's going to get to it, but you can still monetize off of it. People are still going to be interested. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the government still can't come after you from a secrecy order or not let how you do it from a secrecy order come out. Now, it'll be tough because it's live, but you definitely will find yourself, at least in my opinion, in some trouble with the government for doing that. And you may get kind of slapped on the wrist. And I don't know, it may work out, it may not work out into your favor, but you can definitely get a patent. I'm telling you, from a patent attorney, at least here in the U.S., you can still get a patent on something that you disclose publicly or show publicly in that way. Let's finish up what he has to say, and then I'm gonna get my final thoughts.
Would be so easily frustrated to say someone doing a stand-up, a startup company, and they're doing it secretively, and it's like the next iPhone. We're going to keep it under wraps. That's how you end up dead or getting confiscated. And one of the things that I've found is people don't learn from history. Like if you study this history of these sort of incredible technologies and inventions, you'll see a certain number of patterns. And one of them is this, that people who try to do it, even with the best intentions, but are trying to monetize it at the front end and keep it a secret or a patent or a special sauce, it never gets out to the public, and they never end up getting anything for it unless they take a bribe.
Who was the guy you spoke to, the fellow where you said, look, I'm telling you, make it open source, leak it to everybody. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm pretending. Then boom, he was killed. Who was the guy? You talked about somebody on The Lost Century.
Well, I'm not sure in that film. There were several people that had that happen. It's a tragedy.
Was it Thomas Moray or no, not Moray? It was one of the ones you had a conversation with.
I have to look at that. Yeah, I've dealt with hundreds of these inventors over the years.
Who don't want to give it up, who don't want to make it.
They make the same mistake over and over and over and over. Well, actually, one of the groups was, the guys who bought all the Stan Meyer. He had a car that was running on. So
I think we're pretty much wrapping out now. Again, so as a patent attorney, I agree with some of the stuff that he said about patents and secrecy orders and confiscation, but I don't agree with the other part. We all know that, hey, if you have something, invention that's kind of groundbreaking, that's kind of new, novel, that the market is going to receive well, somebody's going to try to find some money on it, whether it's on the back end or the front end. So I still think that people is going to try to still be able to try to monetize off of it. You can still get a patent on it here in the U.S. because you have that year grace period date. So just because it's a public disclosure at a conference or whatever the case may be, that just means you have to file on it a year later. And to the extent that you're using all these help from people across the country, it just complicates that patent application now, because now you have to include all those people who helped out at on the invention. And again, like I said, definitely as far as the monetization, monetizing on the front end, somebody's going to try to monetize out, whether it's the front end, whether it's the back end, whether it's the middle end, or whether it's from the front end to the back end. Somebody's going to try to monetize off of it. That's just the society that we live in. So again, the open source, even though I agree with them in some aspects, I disagree with them in other aspects, just practicality based on my experience as an attorney. I want you guys to let me know in the comment section what you think about this thing. Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? Go check out his archives, DPI archives. I think, man, he has some great stuff on there. And you have to kind of register, which I did. It's free, but I'll continue to try to kind of break down or break down documents from its archive, from the Nikola Teslas, the videos, things like that, because I do think that those are important to serve a purpose. Now, with the secrecy order, this is a very real thing, as PBD talked about, as Dr. Steve Greer talked about. Know what type of secrecy order do yours fall in? Is it type 1, where it's military space applications? Was it number 2, where, okay, it's classified information and you have an agreement with for a security agreement with the Department of Defense? Or is it 3, this catch-all, this general, where it's everything, as long as it's national defense, economic stability? If it kind of disrupts one of those, then the government could take it. You may get paid for it, you may not get paid for it, you may get taken off the planet face of the earth, according to Dr. Steve Greer. So let me know what you guys think about it, and at least when you're inventing and filing patent applications, you better have an understanding of what secrecy order type you fall in, whether or not the government may take it. Again, as he talked about, let history be your biggest teacher. Don't find yourself in a similar situation as these other men or women who came before you found themselves in with the secrecy order and with the government. And hey, best of luck to you. Until next time, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. If you like this content, I'll try to provide more of this. And until next time, peace.